What's up, guys? I'm Ryan Roberts. Welcome into another edition of the At-Large Bid Bearcats podcast. Tonight, I'm joined by the one and only Jim Kelly, one half of the Hall of Fame broadcast and voice of the Bearcats. Jim, welcome in.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How's your week going so far?
So far, so good. Kind of a different week with the holiday there. But feels like a short week. But here we are, Wednesday already, and we're getting ready for game number 2, week number 2 in college football.
Is it crazy to think? Seems like just yesterday we're talking at spring ball, and now we're looking at week 2 already.
Yeah, it is. And you know what's crazier is here we are getting ready to go into week 2, and we're going to blink, and it's going to be Thanksgiving.
Right. Yeah.
It just goes that quick. It's just we got stuff going on every day, and week after week. Even though there's a couple of 2 buys this year, which I think is a nice thing, but at the same time, it just flies by.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, let's get things rolling. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts after Cincinnati's 38-20 win, where Brendan Sorsby over 350 yards passing, named newcomer of the week in the Big 12. Bearcats roll up over 650 yards of offense. What were your thoughts on the Bearcats offense after week 1?
Yeah, I think if you were to say, okay, where did Cincinnati shine, you'd have to say it was the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you really wanted to see was Brendan Sorsby against another team. He looked good in camp. We all saw him. He was a clear, at least in my opinion, the clear favorite to start. There was never really a doubt in my mind, in watching him and hearing Coach Satterfield speak, that he wouldn't be the starter. And I think he came through with flying colors. You could always improve a little bit. And I know, Coach Satterfield brought up that he made some wrong decisions. And actually, Brendan brought that up, too, that there were some things he could have done better. But all in all, for his first game in Cincinnati, I thought he was really, really good. The 22 out of 31, 383 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. Plus he ran for 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a solid day, big time solid day. And I think the rest of the offense was equally as good, not great, but it's game 1 and it's your first time. You got a lot of new players. But I like what they were able to do. They ran the ball a lot in the second half, threw the ball a lot in the first half. We're able to get, I think, 6 running backs carried the ball. And 4 of them over 50 yards. So all in all, I think it was a good day for the offense.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Obviously, wide receiver was up and down last year, somewhat to do with the inconsistencies at the quarterback position. But Xavier Henderson, 101 yards receiving. Joe Royer had a great debut with 5 catches, 89 yards. How much of a benefit is it to have a guy like Joe Royer where you can, find him underneath on the outside and then also have Aaron Turner, Xavier Henderson, Tony Johnson, Xavier Moyes to, kind of stretch the field?
Right. Well, first of all, let's talk about Royer. That was an exceptional first half for him. Not only did he get 5 catches, and that's really good. I don't think he had any even targets in the second half. He didn't play that much in the second half.
Right.
But one of the things that I saw, first of all, let's remember now he was a wide receiver in high school. Okay,
mm-hmm.
lot thinner. He's now 6'5", 255 pounds. But he made a catch coming across the middle. It was a kind of an intermediate throw where he stretched out every inch that he had in that body to make that catch. And even though he's 255 pounds, the first thing in your mind, speaking from a receiver's perspective, is if I reach for this ball, somebody is going to just drill me. Didn't bother him. He made one heck of a catch. He had a couple of others that I thought were really, really good. And he's going to be a weapon. And in press conference on Tuesday, Coach Satterfield said, he was asked a question about, what would you have liked to seen on offense a little different? And he said, I would have liked to see more targets for Joe Royer. So I think from that perspective, great. Now let's talk about Xavier Henderson. He actually had, I don't know if you could call them drops, but there was a couple of passes that he could have caught. One being a little quick screen where he was coming inside, and the ball was literally right here, and it went through his hands. Now, was it thrown a little hard? Maybe. I don't know. I've not seen the replay other than that day. But 7 catches. What do you have? 7 catches, 101 yards, and a touchdown. I thought he had a solid game. The one area, and you brought it up when you named all the other receivers that I would have liked to seen a little bit more of, was more catches for those guys, or at least more targets for the other 5 or 6 receivers that were in the game. They had some catches, but at the same time, nobody really kind of took the pressure off of Xavier or Royer, although they were, those 2 guys were open almost all the time. But I think that's a thing that we see as the season goes on where, and I'm not going to say they're going to double team Royer, and they can't double team Royer and Henderson. But at the same time, I think when you start seeing, let's say Royer against Pitt has another 6, 7 catches, I guarantee you that Miami's going to look his way maybe with a second guy, and that can open up somebody else, whether that's Henderson or one of the other 5 or 6 receivers that you mentioned. I think it's going to open it up for him. So all in all, I like this receiver group, and we watched them really hard over the summer to see. Henderson was a known entity, Royer was a known entity, but who was going to be the rest of them? And there's a number of them there that can certainly play.
Yeah, I think it was really good to see them try to get Barry Jackson and Aaron Turner in space. That's something that they didn't really do much of last year for whatever reason.
Right.
Not sure what to do with, just the philosophy at quarterback or what, but them using both, as well as Tyron Smith on some of those jet sweeps, quick screens, jet pass with Barry Jackson coming across. That was kind of encouraging stuff, because both of those guys, or all 3 of those guys, are really, really electric. We saw a lot of those passes in fall camp as well as throughout the spring, where they were able to show their speed and burst in the open field. And we saw with Aaron Turner on that 49-yard quick pass where he caught it on the outside and burst for 49 yards on that very first drive. So it's encouraging to see them trying to utilize a different philosophy offensively this year with a guy like Sorsby at the helm.
Well, and they know that those guys they are those quick guys, and they're going to get the ball in their hands. And I think they're going to be even more creative as we go down the stretch here. Not the stretch, but as we go through the season. I didn't really ask Coach Satterfield, how much they held back offensively. I think, quite honestly, Sorsby they wanted to see how he handled what they have in the offense right now. And he did a really, really nice job with it. So I look for him to be a little bit more elaborate and a little bit more, I don't want to say tricky, because that's not the thing, but a little bit more of a concept of getting those speed guys involved in the game. So I think we'll see that as the season goes on. But all in all, I was thrilled with the receiver group. The one thing also, in talking about the passing game, I thought he had an inordinate amount of time, most of the time, to throw the football.
Right. Yeah.
I thought the offensive line, and that was one of the things, Coach Satterfield said, they were 5th in the nation last year in running. So the offensive line was good. We know that all 5 of those guys are back. One of the things he wanted to see improvement on was pass protection, and I thought they gave it. Even the Sorsby, where he threw the ball to Sterling Burkhalter on the long touchdown pass, where he kind of bailed out of the pocket, I thought he had time in there. He didn't see Burkhalter at fault first, so him getting out and rolling to his left, and that's a tough throw for a right-handed quarterback when you're throwing it 45, 50 yards down the field. The thing there that was great was that Burkhalter was so open. I think it was more of a broken coverage on Towson's part, but he was able to get the ball to him, and even if he underthrew it a little bit, which I believe he did, it was an easy touchdown.
Right. I was just getting ready to ask you what your thoughts were on their offensive line. I personally thought they did a great job opening holes, especially in the second half. Evan Pryor, 4 carries, over 100 yards. How impressed were you with him and his limited action?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, you go and you read about him and the injuries that he had at Ohio State with the ACL and coming back from it, and really never getting a chance up there to after that injury to get back into the fray. And then when all summer he was, we saw him in in the injury team, the yellow jerseys, I guess they are. I was thinking orange jerseys.
Orange jerseys, yeah.
Orange.
He was in an orange jersey. It would seem like the last 5 or 6 practices.
He was. So he really wasn't. We really weren't sure what to expect. But then his first carry, oh my goodness, he just burst through there, and then you saw that speed, which took him into the end zone. So really, really good. And it was nice to see that, and I know he felt good about it. And like I said before, I think 6, if I remember right, 6 running backs, at least 5 touched the football, and 4 of the 5 or 6 of them had over 50 yards of rushing, which, I did look at the Big 12 stats briefly, which just came today, and the 2 big running backs, Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, and the gentleman, and I can't think of his name right now, who's at Texas Tech, who are the 2 guys. What's that? Brooks, yes. Brooks. 2 guys. They each had, one had 28 carries, one had 27 carries. And you think about that's great. They had their yardage and so on and so forth. But at the same time, that really wears you down over the course of a season. And Cincinnati was able to use 6 different guys. And again, I think down the stretch, maybe Corey Kiner gets 15, 20 carries. But then again, you look at what Pryor was able to do, you're certainly going to try to keep him in there. Same thing with with Williams. You're going to get him in there and get some carries too. So you don't have to worry about Corey Kiner getting 20 or 25 carries, although he's still able to do that. You don't want to do that game after game. And I think they showed really, really good depth at running back.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, they rotated a lot of different guys in there. I think Coach Satterfield said it was either 35 or 37 different players made their first appearance as a Bearcat.
34 new players.
34 new players. Defensively, we saw the constant. What were your thoughts on the defense, all things considered, with them rotating so many guys?
Yeah, I mean, he was clear going into the game that he wanted to get a lot of guys into the game in meaningful plays, and the reason for that was depth down the road. Okay, not necessarily for the game against Towson, but for depth down the road. So let's say we get the game 5 in Texas Tech. We're out in Tucson, or I'm sorry, in Lubbock. He wants guys that he can put into the game that have been there and done it already. That's not their first game. And I think he was able to accomplish that with the 34 new players. I think talking to Coach Combs last night, I think between corner and safety, they rotated 15 guys in. That's a lot. They were able to do 6 at linebacker. I don't know the exact number in the D line, but probably 8 or 9 guys. So they were able to do that and keep people fresh. And one of the other comments Coach Combs made last night was, I'll take a guy that's maybe my second team guy that's at 100% versus my first team guy who's been in there and is sucking wind right now and can't get back out there at 75%. So I think they got what they wanted out of that. I think there's certainly some big adjustments. This is we watched again through spring ball and then through summer camp. We watched this 3-3-5 defense, and that we saw some success with it. We saw some holes in it, and I think, quite honestly, I was a little surprised that Towson had as much success moving the football against that defense as they did. 438 yards, I believe. A kind of split right down the middle between run and pass, gave up some big chunk plays. Now, in talking to Coach Satterfield, he feels that those were just guys that were out of position. That wasn't the defense that caused it. It was just guys not being in the right position, making the right plays. And he said those are things that are correctable. And that's good to know because, you give up 438 yards to Towson, and Pittsburgh came back this past week against Kent State and had 550 yards, in a guy run for 145. They're probably licking their chops right now when they see what Towson was able to do. But if it's correctable, which is what Coach Satterfield said, then let's correct it. So there were still some great performances on defense. They made some really, really nice plays at times. I was a little surprised we didn't pick up an interception somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
With that secondary. I'm going back to the first time I saw it, which was Iowa State in at Nippert last year, and they had 3 interceptions in that game, maybe 4. I don't remember exactly, but all in all, I mean, I think the defense played well. They at times early in the game, we had a muff punt, ball inside the 10. They held them to a field goal. Another time held them to a field goal. So they did make some plays, but I'd like to see a little bit more consistency defensively this week against Pitt.
So key takeaways from the defense, for me personally, it was good to see Josh Minkins, someone that's new within this defense. Obviously, everyone's new, but newcomer to Cincinnati, Josh Minkins played well, 6 tackles. Jared Bartlett looked really good, and
like him a lot.
Yeah, I think once you get, and we'll hit on this, once you get Dante Corleone back there to kind of plug the middle, I think that's really going to open things up for Dingle on the outside as well as Bartlett coming up the middle. And also, I was really impressed with Monte Whedon and Simeon Coleman, as well as Jaquan Sanks, all 3 true freshmen.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about Sanks, the first true freshman to start since Copeland, and that's been a few years. So great to see him in there. And I mean, I think there's a huge amount of potential on the defensive side. And you're right. The fact that Dante Corleone's back, going to plug up that middle. And you mentioned Bartlett, and I honestly can see him playing more almost, even though it's still going to be a 3-3-5, I can see him being more as that kind of outside rush guy, particularly against a team like Pittsburgh, who tries to keep a tempo offense and wants to throw the ball around a lot. Again, what did they have this past week? 40 attempts. That's a lot. Well, that was the starter. They had a second guy come in and throw the ball 10 times. So, I mean, they had a lot of attempts in there of throwing the football. So, I like Bartlett's his speed. He's a guy that can really do it. And so, all in all, I mean, I saw good things out of everybody on defense. Just a few mistakes there that cost big plays.
You kind of hit on it a little bit when you mentioned the muff punt, special teams. Special teams will need to be cleaned up somewhat. Yeah. My thing though, Carter Brown obviously missed one of his field goal attempts. I personally don't think that's something to really be too concerned about with the time that he missed throughout camp. I don't think I've seen him kick, but maybe twice throughout camp. And I think the last week and a half, maybe 2 weeks leading up to the game, he was on the sidelines dealing with a minor injury. So I'm not too concerned about that, but I do think they definitely need to clean some things up on the special teams.
That injury situation is what you wonder about when he missed that field goal. Is he still hurt somewhat? And I know it's not a major injury, but at the same time, that was an easy field goal. If you look
right.
at if you look at a kicker who we weren't asking, this was not a 48-yarder or a 52-yarder. I mean, I forget exactly what it was, 30 something. That's one that he could have probably made with his left foot, but he didn't. And you just wonder, is there more there? Now again, they've got backups at that position, and I feel that that'll be okay. And maybe this week he kicks the game winner against Pitt. So we'll see. But you did wonder about that. And then since we're talking special teams, Mike Musari, who didn't drop a ball during summer camp. First play that he plays in a college game, ball goes right through his hands and he loses it. He lost another one too. He fumbled another one, but he was able to fall on it. So, but he'll get better. We've seen him when there's no pressure on and when he's playing against his own team. He's a sure-handed guy. I think he'll be fine. He did have a 10-yard return on one. So all in all, that was good. I don't know why Towson kicked the ball on the kickoffs the way they did, kind of the high, short. But the one thing I do like there is initially it was a fair catch. Okay, we'll take the ball. If it was inside the 20, it comes out to the 25. It was at the 25. I think one of them was right at the 25. And then sooner or later, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to run this back a little bit. So they were able to do that. And all in all, they did fine there. And, the other gaffe, I guess you would say, on special teams was a kickoff that went out of bounds that gave Towson the ball on the 35. You can't do that against good teams.
Right. So let's transition to Pitt. Obviously, Bearcats will take on Pitt. Pitt's coming in off a 55-20 win, 55-28 win over 55-24. Sorry, win over
okay.
Penn State. You mentioned it earlier, but Eli Holstein, 30 of 40, 336 yards, which is between that and then the 570 yards they had on offense. Those are both highs going back to the 2021 AAC championship season that they had. Kenny
Pickett, that was the quarterback of that team. Yeah.
Kenny Johnson, 7 catches, 105 yards. You mentioned him earlier. Western Carolina transferred Desmond Reed, 14 carries, 145 yards. What are your first impressions on Pitt offensively?
Well, so we saw Pitt last year, and we caught them early. They were not a good football team, and they made some changes last year, but they were very methodical and kind of I'm not sure exactly what you call it. It was a very pro-type offense, okay? Go to the huddle, call the play, go up to the line and run it. They got away from that. You mentioned Desmond Reed, the transfer from Western Carolina. They brought in also with him the offensive coordinator from Western Carolina, a gentleman by the name of Cade Bell. He wants to run 85 plays a game. The last person I heard say that was Brian Kelly when he was at Cincinnati, and they were able to do it those years. So it's a big time different offense. And actually it goes back more. You mentioned the 2021 year for Pitt when they won the ACC. It goes back more to what they were running then, and they got away from that. So from that standpoint, and let's talk a little bit about Eli Holstein. Okay, people are saying, who's this guy? Well, he's a transfer from guess where? Alabama. And again, that doesn't mean that he's great just because he was recruited by Alabama, but there's a reason he was at Alabama for a while.
Right.
We had the fortune of getting Jerome Ford from Alabama, and we saw what kind of player he was. So that being said, you got a guy here with talent. And then Desmond Reed, you mentioned him being transferred as well. Kenny Johnson, who was the receiver you alluded to, he was here last year. And then who's the tight end? Bartholomew, I think's his name. He's really good, and he had some catches against Cincinnati. So they, from an offensive standpoint, they can light it up. Now, that being said, kind of midway, not maybe just short of midway through the third quarter, they were only up like 28-20 on Kent State. So they struggled a bit. And then Desmond Reed, who we just been talking about, he also had a 78-yard punt return for a touchdown, which opened things up a little bit as well.
Right. So offensively, how much do you think – defensively, how much do you think Tyson Veit actually showed? And because Scott Satterfield said earlier that they, by design, weren't going to get much pressure on the quarterback because they were only sending 3 and dropping 8 in coverage against Towson.
Yeah, so, and they did that for the most part. We talked about Jared Bartlett. He did rush a few times. I think got 1 sack, and there was a couple of other sacks as well. I think 3 total. But I think you're going to see, in this particular case against Pitt, maybe a little bit more of that. And the thing about, Corleone being back is, and you touched on it, Ryan, is it's going to plug things up a little bit on the inside. And what it also does, and we found this out last year, is it makes them use a second blocker on Corleone at times, which frees up some space on the inside to maybe send the inside guys, Dingle or whomever is in there at the time, through. And, I don't know much about Kent State's defense, but they were able to sack Pittsburgh 4 times. And that's a lot of sacks from that perspective. Now, on the other side of the ball, and this would take it back to our offense, Pitt got 5 sacks out of the game. So, but at the same time, if Kent State's able to sack Pittsburgh 4 times, Cincinnati should be able to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Defensively, Pitt against Kent State's offense only gave up 31 yards rushing. Do you think Scott Satterfield, given the success they had on the ground last year with over 200 yards rushing, do you think he tries to start there and then work his way down the field in terms of opening up the pass game? Or do you open the game trying to throw the ball, get Sorsby going
Yeah.
and then rely on the run game?
I think honestly, one of the things that you don't want to be as predictable.
Right.
So I think, when they think you're going to run, you want to throw. If they think you're going to pass, you want to run. Not necessarily 3rd and 15 or something like that. But I don't know exactly. I mean, I think it's obviously he likes the run game, and with that offensive line, stay with it. I think, without question, using the play action, and Sorsby's really good at that. So, if you can get the run game established early, it's going to open up that passing game for you. So, I mean, I think we'll see a nice mix. If you go back literally, 8-10 years that Satterfield's been a head coach, it's been right down the middle. I mean, yeah, there are games where, you pass for more than you run considerably or vice versa. But at the same time, if you look at his averages at the end of the year, it's right there all the time. That 240 yards passing, that 220 yards rushing. So I think he would certainly love to run for 220 yards against Pittsburgh. You mentioned how little Kent State was able to run on him, and I don't know anything about Kent State. So maybe it's the fact that they really don't have a running game and they had to throw the football. But at the same time, credit to Pittsburgh for getting to the quarterback 5 times, which probably put them in some 2nd and longs, 3rd and long type situations where they had to throw the ball.
Right. So from a physical standpoint, that was kind of the, I guess, keys going into the game last year. It's can Cincinnati match the physical style of Pitt? Pat Narduzzi, always a physical brand of defense. Defensively, they put a lot of pressure on you at every position, both in the run and pass game. How do you feel about Cincinnati's ability on both sides of the ball to match that physicalness of a team like Pitt?
Yeah, well, I mean, so let's take the offensive scheme and defensive scheme out of it. I thought Cincinnati matched up well against Pitt last year. I didn't see them overmatched at any spot. Now, the Bearcats didn't have a lot of depth last year, so maybe that would be the one thing Pitt had over on them. And again, we're talking about an ACC team here, a Power 4, conference team that had an equally bad year as Cincinnati. I want to say Pitt was 3-9 last year, I believe. Same exact record as Cincinnati. So we're not talking about powerhouses in those leagues, but these are power conferences. And I think both of them matched up well. And I don't see that being an issue. If it is, I see the Bearcats have taken a big step in the direction of being more physical this year. They're a little bit bigger. They're certainly faster. They've got more depth. So from that perspective, I think they can match up. Then it comes down to what we just took off the table, which were the schemes on both sides. And you talked about Narduzzi. So when he was defensive coordinator at Cincinnati under Mark D'Antonio, he was the most aggressive defensive coach I've ever seen in my life. I mean, there were situations where he was, press coverage, blitzing everybody when you didn't need to do that. But he just likes to do that. And although he's not the defensive coordinator anymore, he certainly has an influence on that. And I think you're going to see that same type of aggressive defense out of this Pittsburgh team. They tried that last year in Cincinnati. You had a mobile quarterback in Emory Jones. He was able to make some runs, and it kind of backed them off a little bit. And Bearcats got out to a fairly large lead and were able to hold on. But I don't know. This looks to me, if I kind of look at the numbers, it looks like this is going to be a very close game.
Yeah, I would kind of echo those same words and agree with you. Bearcats do open as a 2.5-point favorite for those out there that are into the betting. What are your 3 keys, I guess, for the Bearcats to come away with a home victory in week 2?
Yeah, I think number one is play solid defense. Okay, you're still going to give up some plays. This is a good offensive football team you're playing, But so you give up a few, explosive plays over 15 yards, which honestly they gave up too many against Towson last week. But I think if those mistakes that they made on defense can be cleaned up, they hold Pitt to just a few of those. So I think that's number one. Secondly, and you hit on it real hard, I think they need to run the football. In Pittsburgh's feeling pretty good about themselves of giving up only 20-some yards against Kent State. And if you're able to hit a couple of runs and, maybe it's Pryor, maybe it's Corey Kiner. It doesn't have to be a touchdown. It doesn't have to be that 69-yard run. But, a couple of 20-yard runs, and boy, all of a sudden now they're coming in a little bit tighter to play that run game and play action pass. And Sorsby has that beautiful deep ball. Take advantage of that at times and throw that ball down the field. Third, since I think it's going to be a tight game, is you got to play better. You got to play better special teams. And again, we talked about Connor Brown, and if he gets a shot on that field goal, he's going to have to make it this week, because it might be that kind of close game where it comes down to a field goal.
Well, I also think field position will come into play with Mason Fletcher. What are your thoughts on? There's going to be a lot of emotion surrounding this game, obviously, with the rivalry. But how cool is it for you, as someone who's been around the program for a really long time, to see the 2018 come back and get honored for their Cincinnati's first BCS appearance with that 2008 Big East championship?
Right. I think it's great. That was a good football team, a really good football team. So seeing some of those guys back and kind of reminiscing about that year, and of course the 2009 team went undefeated, but that 2008 team, they had a lot of grit. And they had to play Pitt at Nippert, the second last game of the year. And, Pitt was really, really good that year, and they were able to beat them. And then, of course, the Bearcats went on to knock off Syracuse in the 12th game that year to win the Big East and to propel them into, as you said, their first BCS bowl game. So I think them coming back and being honored is great. And I said this on the air. So the play that I described before, where Xavier Henderson was coming inside and looked like he was going to catch the ball, and Joe Royer was out there. I'm trying to think who else was out there, maybe an offensive lineman to block, and I think Henderson would have gone the distance. But I've seen UC try to run that every year since 2008 and 2009, when Tony Pike would throw to Marty Gilliard, and nobody does it like those guys. That was a beautiful play that those guys ran, and they had it down. So it's going to be neat to see that and to see those guys again. And I don't know how many of them are coming back yet, but we know there'll be a bunch of them there. So well-deserved for those guys, and I think it's going to be fun to see them.
Who are you offensively? Who are you most excited about this season after, obviously one game?
Yeah, I think I'd split it right down the middle between Sorsby and Royer right now.
Yeah.
And part of that is because they're new, and we didn't know what the expectations were. If we talked about Pryor before and not getting his shots at Ohio State. Joe Royer didn't either. 4 catches in his career. And part of that was injury. Part of that was just having, Ohio State with stacked number of players in front of him. But we look at him. That guy, there's not one thing about him that says that he couldn't be a great NFL tight end. 6'5", 255 pounds, great hands, soft hands, knows what he's doing out there, smart guy. So, he's fun to watch. And I agree with Coach Satterfield. Let's use him a little bit more. And I think he was, at least what I heard was he got a little bit tired, and they kept him out. They didn't need him in the second half, so rest him a little bit.
Right.
But, from that perspective, I really look forward to watching him more. And then on Brendan Sorsby, I think the bar he can raise that bar big time. He had a good game, no doubt about it. He had a few drops. Talked about Xavier Henderson. I think there was 2 drops, but he was 22 out of 31. So let's add 2 on there. He threw 1 screen pass into The Corey Kiner was the intended receiver, but he was well covered. So he did what every quarterback should do, which is throw it right at the feet of Kiner. So there's 3 plays right there the 3 incompletions that he didn't actually have to have, but still had a great game. And we didn't see him run that much. The one run was very impressive. The 2-yard run was okay, the touchdown. But that 13-yarder that he kind of decided that, I'm going to go ahead and run this ball right up the middle. He did really well, but I'd like to see him a couple of times maybe get out on the edge and run as well. But that being said, what I liked about what I saw when he got out of when he had the break containment was that he continued to look down the field for an open receiver. And the 3 times that he did it, at least 3 times, he found those receivers. One of them was that long touchdown to Burkholder.
Right. It's funny that, we're sitting here talking about Royer the way we are, because back during fall camp, Josh Stepp told me Joe Royer will be the best tight end in the Big 12 this year, and it's not even close. And then he comes out and has a performance like he did in game 1. I mean, granted, it's Towson, but just the way he moved, the way he picked his spots, the catches he made, even in the run game. I don't think people understand how good he is in the run game with how well he blocks. But, it's prophetic that Stepp tells me before the season, hey, that's the best tight end in the Big 12 right there. Yeah. He goes out and has a big scrimmage and then follows that up with, a really good performance in the week 1.
That scrimmage was unbelievable, where he had the 4 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns and 4 catches in the first 8 plays. You're right about that. And then you mentioned about the way that he's blocked. I talked about the one quick screen to Henderson where he was out there. He took his corner and ran him into the bench, which was great. And had the pass been caught, it might have been a touchdown. But I saw other ones too. And you're right. A lot of times we get used to, particularly in the NFL, of watching a pass catching tight end who really does a great job on the passing side of things, but is just there to get in the way of. He doesn't do any blocking. He just gets in the way of somebody here and there. But that being said, Royer's a complete player. And I'm telling you what, there's got to be a lot of scouts, and I know he's got another year left next year. Got to be a lot of NFL scouts just licking their chops at him and what, see the rest of the season that he's going to have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think from a health standpoint, Phil Wilder didn't play in week 1, who was projected to be the offensive tackle starter. He was out. Joey Belgian at tight end, he was also out. So from a health standpoint, it's also encouraging that as good as Cincinnati looked offensively, they can be better. They're still missing a few key pieces on that offense.
Yeah, I think Belgian coming in, although I was impressed with the entire tight end group, but Belgian will certainly help, and Wilder coming back I think will help as well. So, yeah, there's some nicked up guys. The fortunate part is none of them are out for the year or an extended period of time, at least at this point. We don't know. They're really quiet a lot on, what the injuries are, but at this point it doesn't appear those guys will be out for a long period of time.
Yeah, I'd say defensively getting Corleone back alone and sticking to a little bit smaller rotation should really help this week.
Well, and that's the thing. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Corleone only plays, 15, 18 snaps. That might be a little low, but we saw him, Ryan. He worked out every day when he couldn't have contact. But at the same time, there's game readiness and there's getting in shape for football and he did a lot of the running and so on. But and this is one of the things Coach Satterfield brought up at his radio show last night is, that's a little different when you're in there getting pushed around or pushing around 300-pound linemen. It takes a little bit more out of you than just running up and down the sideline. But, we know that he prepped for it. He had the feeling that he was coming back. And although he hasn't officially been cleared for the game yet, it looks like that's the direction it's going to go.
Yeah, I loved Coach Combs' comment last night of just act like the quarterback has a donut on his helmet. Talking about motivation for Corleone to get him moving early and often.
Yeah, whatever.
Right. Well, Jim, it's been a blast. I always enjoy talking ball with you and having you on. And I'll see you Saturday as the Bearcats take on Pitt at noon.
I'll see you. Thanks for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it as always.